There are the thumbs, so we can start.
Please start, Clemens.
Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Clemens. It is an honor, better than I can say, to speak with you.
It's a great pleasure, Steve, to speak with you.
It is a greater pleasure for me, as you know.
And it's a wonderful pleasure to speak to you all.
Yes, it is. We are very lucky here to be giving you 6 talks in the next 3 days. And they stand as our statement of where our division is and where it is going and how to deal with it while it's here.
So the division that we're talking about is the Connected Systems division. A few things have changed since my last TechEd Europe. I now work for the firm. And I joined this wonderful division which owns everything from MIIS. If you don't know what that is, you're going to learn in this session. To ADFS, Active Directory, Federation Services and Active Directory on the one side, to Host Integration Services and Biztalk on the other side. And then we have frameworks, programming frameworks like the Windows Workflow Foundation, and we have Windows Space, and we have the Windows Communication Foundation. And the workflow teams and the Space team and the Windows Communication Foundation team are really happy today because we're shipping.
Should ship today.
Yes, so we are RTM. Now everything we say now, we can say, actually, this is the stuff you can use today, and all the other things are, well, we're going to get to that point.
You think they might wait till they get back?
Yeah.
3 days.
Okay, that's fine.
So you can think of our division as owning everything between ASP.NET and SQL. We're everything in the middle, and that's us.
Correct. So the 6 talks we're going to be presenting you are, this one is about where do we come from. So it's a whole overview over the technologies that we had and that we have in our division. So we're going to give you the all-over overview of where we came from and where we are. Then we're going to talk about 4 particular areas of concern in distributed architecture. First, we're going to talk about logic and what that means. Then we're going to talk about data and what that means. Then we're going to talk about presentation and how you would want to build presentation in a connected system. And then we're going to talk about security and identity. And then lastly, Steve will bring in his big crystal ball and give you a glimpse into the future. What are things going to look like in 2007, 2008? So that's the last talk that we have in this series. So it's just one big story, and we couldn't squish it all into one session. So we said, can we have 6? And the TechEd organizers said yes. So we've been trying 2 times already, hidden away somewhere else, just to be ready for you. So let's go and start with that. Remember? So back in those days, where did you want to go? What were you doing? When this was the official Microsoft tagline, Steve, you surely remember that one.
I was still older than you back when that was current, Clemens.
That's right. That was 1996. A lot of things happened in 1996. For instance, Java came on the market. Steve Jobs got his job back at Apple. Dolly the clone sheep was cloned or born. We had wonderful products such as Internet Explorer, the Microsoft mouse. That wonderful model just came first out. This had the really kind of erotic feel to it. Nah.
Clemens. And this is the last time you could point with pride at your national team.
That's exactly right, because we won with the golden goal, the Euro 96. What is that?
That was a boo, Clemens. I have a feeling you're probably mostly with people who have my attitude towards your team. They want to see it lose. See, Clemens.
Thank you very much. Okay. And lose badly. Wonderful. Thank you.
By 1 goal in the second overtime. Not that we're bringing up anything.
But something else really significant happened in that year. On December 10, we shipped Microsoft Transaction Server 1.0. It's interesting how different, timescales are. Next, rejoining Apple, is that already 10 years ago? That doesn't seem like it. Dolly the clone sheep, does that seem like 10 years ago? Doesn't seem like it, but MTS 1.0 shipping, that seems like 25 years ago, really. And it was a very significant software release. MTS transformed the way PC server applications work. MTS transformed the way how people build software applications on any platform today. Because if you look at the things that we do in the Java world, right, most of them are still based on principles that came about with that wave of technologies. That came about with technologies that shipped within 6 months from Microsoft 10 years ago. So here's a list of those things. It's pretty astonishing. We had wonderful projects such as Visual InterDev, which is dear and close to our heart in our division because most of our senior managers worked on that product. We have OLEDB, the OLEDB SDK with the ActiveX data objects, and then of course the OLEDB moniker just went away, and now we call this thing ADO, and now ADO.net, even though it has nothing to do with it. IIS 3 was shipping, which was really IIS 2 with a little bit of an add-on. It was a service pack. And I can tell you a little more about this when I show you the next slide to this, because just to remind you, well, there's a wonderful share inside of Microsoft that I can now get to, and that's called products, and it's a server. And on products, there's a directory called Boneyard. And on Boneyard is all the old stuff. So I said, all right, we have virtual PC, so let's build one. So I built a virtual PC that's accurate as of that day. So let's see. Here we go. So here we have IIS 3. So the interesting thing was, how do you install IIS 3? And this is really, all of these things, I'm just showing you this VPC to show you how far we've come. So I start to put those things together. This is how IIS 3 looks, the start page. This is AdventureWorks. Everybody who's got to do something with SQL Server remembers that name, or at least SQL Server 2005, because that's what the new sample database looks like. So we had that as a sample page for ASP. Now I was looking to install IIS 3. I knew that was current at the time, but I couldn't find an installable version of it. Turns out the installable version is asp.exe. So it's just an add-on pack to IIS 2, which tells you how confused the branding was at the day.
That was because they just bought ASP, Clemens, and so they were just adding it on.
Did they buy it?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Clemens, you say that like I would lie to you, and I would never lie to you.
Actually, you would.
That's true, but I'm not lying in this particular case.
So we have the wonderful, so what we have here is IE3, and it's got this wonderful page loaded, so we can now look at the wonderful source code, I hope. At least we could. There it is. So here we have active server pages, remember that logo? And then we have this wonderful code for the page counter inline. So that's how that all started. That was the first manifestation of that programming model that we had back in 1996. Then we had another thing here. That's MTS. That's the Transaction Server Explorer. If you're familiar with COM Plus as it ships today, still on Vista, well, that's the predecessor of it. It's got the wonderful little packages here with the little balls in them. Steve, why are those icons in there?
We had to pay a graphic artist to make those spinning balls because it's the only thing you can demo in middleware, Clemens.
So it's interesting. It's interesting that there is actually a behavior, well, a thing that sits in MTS and that actually sits in COM Plus, whose only job it is to make those balls spin. So there's actually functionality in there which turns on the balls and stops the balls in the UI.
That's called tracing. It has other uses.
It does?
Yes, like it monitors calls coming in.
Oh, really?
You are such a lover of the IT Pro, Clemens.
I am. And then there's stuff here that you love this, right? Wonderful Visual Basic 5. And that's the way how you build a little component So we have object context that you can get, and then you can go and do a lot of stuff, and then at the end you can tell the object context to commit or abort. Right here you say set complete, and you say set abort. So all those things that you're reasonably familiar with, if you have built COM+ applications or MTS applications, or now you're building Windows Communication Foundation applications, which have the same model of automatic transactions if you wanted to. All these things started in '96. So that's a very cool thing, and we're very happy that we're shipping now sort of for the 10th anniversary of MTS, we're shipping the actual successor version that's built complete from the ground up new. And it took 7 years to do so.
This would be called COM+ 4.0. We should call WCF COM+ 4.0, do you think?
Maybe.
No.
Not?
I think .NET was called COM+ 2.0 for a while. They stole the name.
Oh yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember. That's why COM+ 1.5 is 1.5 and not 2.0.
Exactly.
So before those things happened, before the MTS came around, and we had this PC-based middleware model, there were basically, well, a few web pages, and if we were thinking about the web, 95, 96, there was server-side includes and CGIs, and that's what you were using when you were building applications of that sort. And there was really only explicit transactions that you could build with stuff like Tuxedo, and Microsoft only came out with MSDTC in early '96 with SQL Server 6.5. So if you wanted to do any transactional work, you had to go with something like Tuxedo. But you didn't really have a framework to host your applications. And that framework it turned out to be so attractive that it got cloned. And you can see, if you look at the application server market as it presents itself today, that there are a lot of elements of this initial idea, this set of infrastructure that was published in 1996. Now, I'm not saying that Java, the Java world, or the .NET world as of today is a full clone of those things, because there was a lot of innovation happening on top of those ideas. So the Java people looked at it and improved on it, and then the .NET people looked at it again and improved on it. But this is, we are only 10 years really into the application server story on the PC platform, or you could also say on the Unix platform. Before that, we didn't really have a well-defined hosting story for components, a component-oriented application story as we have today. So that's a very interesting insight. It's a very, very young, field. There are 3 waves that you can identify for applications. The first wave predates this wave of application servers, and that's the client-server wave. It's still alive and kicking, where you have a client and you have a database, or you have some host application, and you either just polishing that up, the host application, or you have a rich front end for just a database. So there's nothing really happening at the server side. That's the classic client-server scenario, and it's very much still in use for small departmental applications, or sometimes even for large apps. So the characteristics of that are typically LAN communication, because those applications consume so much bandwidth that you can only effectively run them in a LAN. And everybody who's tried to put a fat client in front of a database over a long wire knows that this is really painful. And you end up doing a lot of caching, and it's just bad. And you have something like workgroup identity, where you have a local logon, where you probably have the logon sitting in your database. And that's perfectly fine, because you have one silo, one application that you work with. The next story is, and that's what the NTS wave and COM+ wave is for, and all the application servers are for, is the N-tier wave. So we have WAN communication, internet scale communication. We have an enterprise identity, where we have Active Directory, some directory services, or a single sign-on service that logs us on in other places. So that's the wave that we are still in, if you will. But the way forward is what we call the Federated Systems wave, where we try to build an infrastructure, and we've taken the first steps with WCF, to enable you to build systems that don't depend on those simple mechanisms such as direct identity. When I have a system here, down here, it's really difficult for, if you sit up on one of those computers, to just propagate your identity down to that system, and the system wouldn't care. The system only needs to know whether you are allowed to do certain things. So instead of bringing your identity, which would mean that this backend system knows all 4 million users of the front-end systems, you just bring a ticket that says, hey, I can do this. We're going to explain all of that in more detail when we go into identity. We need to have a way to make all of those things talk, even though they run on different platforms. Not only do we need to get the data across, but we also need to have a way to deal with transactions. We also need to have a way to deal with failure in transports. We need to have a way to use queues interoperably between those systems. To really have a large architecture, an architecture that not only talks between the pieces you control, but also reaches out into pieces of applications that you don't control. We need to have more other abstractions. We need to have more technology help and frameworks help, and that's what we're out to build. This is about building systems that are built on top of applications. You can think of any of those things as an application, and they're contributing their capabilities into a bus, a federated services bus, if you will. And you can tap functionality from all those applications and integrate them into new applications. So it's all about breaking the silos. And this is what you probably have heard of as SOA, service-oriented architecture. That's the thing that's behind that. But to enable service-oriented architecture, we really, really need to have more better abstractions. So we're going to walk you through, in these 6 talks, really through all the elements and considerations for large-scale integration applications and for large-scale distributed systems, and what you need to do and what the considerations are and what the patterns are that you can use. So let's look at the evolution of all the different technologies that we have. Let's start with application services, and I already talked about that a little bit, so I can be quick. So the first thing is MTS. We have a component-oriented application runtime. We have declarative transactions, declarative security. Declarative security insofar that we have roles, and you no longer check against the identity or the group that someone is in Active Directory, but you rather talk about roles that are application specific. Then we went and extended that model with Windows 2000 and added features such as loosely coupled events, which is a lightweight pub subsystem, and queued components, where you can actually make a call and that call goes through MSMQ. And we added a lot of capabilities for throttling, for shielding your application of too much load. And we enhanced that by adding another programming model to it. Using CompLus required you to either run applications in Visual Basic and Visual Basic 6, which has had a reduced functionality set because Visual Basic 6 was single-threaded. So there were a couple of things that you just couldn't do with enterprise services, which you could do with C++. C++ was just much too hard. So with enterprise services, we put a managed programming model on top of this, called System.Enterprise Services, which gave us a lot of new features, including attribute-based programming and XML configuration. And the Windows Communication Foundation, even though built completely independent of CompLus, so it has none of the code base of CompLus, does 2 things. First of all, it carries all those features forward. So it gives you, with minor exceptions, such as the loosely coupled events thing is not there. Steve, do you wish to comment on that?
Clemens, are you trying to embarrass me?
No, I just give you an opportunity to speak.
A rich eventing system that works well on one machine didn't find its way into the new products.
Okay. That was well worded, Steve.
You're just trying to say that my old thing was goofy.
Yes.
You're trying to say that. I'm a better architect now than I was then.
Okay, good. I'm happy. So we're carrying all that functionality forward, and we're going to give you all the features of web services in addition to that. So the Windows Communication Foundation is clearly in the tradition of MTS, CompTIA in terms of features, but it's a completely new base. One cool thing though is if you have CompTIA-based apps, whether they're managed code or unmanaged code, so you have your VB6 components running in CompTIA today, there's a tool that's part of the Windows Communication Foundation SDK, or of the broader Windows SDK, and you can actually turn each VB6 component into a WCF service by just running a utility. And that's a very cool thing. So it's the service config tool, and that will allow you to turn any CompTIA service into a WCF service without any code changes. Let's look at the communication angle of this. Until 2002, our story was really MSMQ or DCOM, and then we had a little bit of the SOAP toolkit, which allowed you to do the first steps in web services. Web services is something that the web services stack has been developed, and all the standards have been developed in the last 7 years. So since 1999, we've invested a lot of money in this, and we've done so explicitly to build the Windows Communication Foundation. So today actually marks the end of 7 years of work in defining those standards, all the way from cooperating with IBM on SOAP, through cooperating with a lot of partners on W security, WS reliable messaging policy, and all those things. And this whole effort just comes to a good end today with shipping the Windows Communication Foundation, which is pretty exciting. So in 2002, when we brought up the .NET framework, sorry for the wraparound in the little bullets, you need to combine those things. It's a little puzzle. I'm sorry, Steve.
Clemens, you are the graphic artist for all of these slides.
Yeah, I know, I messed this one up.
You're going to be doing more apologizing when people see your artwork in the future slides.
You think?
Yes.
Okay. So we came around in the .NET framework with managed wrappers for most of these. So system.messaging is the way, until yesterday, how you would send messages through MSMQ. Then we have enterprise services that I already talked about. We have remoting, and we have ASP.NET Web Services and the web service enhancements. It's really hard for everyone to build applications that have a rich architecture and need several communication paths to build those apps with those technologies, because you need to master 5 of them. And they're appropriate for different use cases. That's really hard. So we decided to just integrate them all, and that's what the Windows Communication Foundation is all about. The Windows Communication Foundation gives you one way to program. It's about making it easier to build distributed apps. If you want to do a one-way queued connection, if you want to do a one-way direct connection, if you want to do a request-response connection on TCP or on HTTP, if you want to do a duplex connection, you can do all those things. Even more so, as Steve will tell you in the last talk, there's right things coming in the future with this model.
There are right things coming all the time with every model, Clemens. Right things. That's what we do. I wonder if they're going to do something like that in Java. Like get rid of all their existing APIs and just have one moving forward that does everything. They're all going to get together, all those different Java companies, and negotiate a new API. Like friends, holding hands. Maybe not, huh?
No.
We kick their booty.
Yeah. It may happen.
It might.
Pigs may fly.
I could win the lottery.
Yeah, and pigs may fly.
I would rather win the lottery.
Yes, you think?
I don't care about
I think it's just as likely. And that with you not playing.
I play when it gets up to 200 million.
Oh, really?
A puny 10 or 20 million is not worth my time.
That's right, because you make more than that each year.
Don't you wish, Clemens?
Yes. So
then we would both retire.
Oh, you would give me?
Absolutely.
Oh, I love you. So we're taking, what we've done is we analyzed clearly all the features that are in the individual technologies, and we carry forward the the key features of all of them. There are, and this is something I need to say specifically to our customers who use remoting, there are some things about remoting which we explicitly do not support. All the other technologies are supported in terms of features very well and almost directly. However, with remoting, there are certain things which we don't do because they are problematic in distributed environments. So we don't allow reference passing. So you cannot pass an object by reference and then have the server call you back on the client. Why is that? Because first of all, how do you secure that? Second of all, you need to recompile the world if you change one thing. Third of all, it just introduces a sort of tight coupling in your system that you don't have two components, but you really have one component that's stretched over two machines. If you want to do this, use remoting. We also don't allow you to talk directly to fields or properties. We don't allow you to do this because that's a local concept, right? Setting a property is a thing that you do on a local machine. If you want to do that across machines, you can do so, but you need to use remoting. So all the use cases that are strictly only about distributed objects, you need to stick with remoting as it is today, and we're not carrying those things forward. What we carry forward is something that we know we can scale, that we know will work, that we know will work across machines and also on an internet scale. We know exactly that those programming techniques will not work on an internet scale. And that's why we don't support them. So it was a painful cut. It was a painful thing to do. We actually tried to make those things work, but we just found out that we couldn't. We found out that we cannot make constructs that are inherently built for on-machine and for within the same process work on an internet scale, and that's why we don't support them. So much for frameworks and application servers. There's also a big story in the identity world, and that's also part of our division. In 1996, when we only had departmental applications mostly, and NT was barely making any room into the data center, was mostly just sitting under someone's desk running an application, a departmental application, it was perfectly okay to just have an NT domain store and just have a few users around an application just be in that NT domain store, and NT would just give you the authentication services. Oh, it's dry. As applications got bigger, and actually as organizations got bigger, we needed to have something that would scale better. We needed to have something that would actually be able to store more information about users, that we could query from applications that would actually go and drive all the information about our users and our infrastructure out to applications and make them approachable for applications. So that's Active Directory. Active Directory is the service that connects identity, that federates identity in the enterprise. That was that brought us Kerberos, which we now use today to just create an enterprise-wide single sign-on, something that was really hard in the age of NT domains. In the age of NT domains, we're just sending hash passwords around. And today with Kerberos, of course, it's a much more secure way of authenticating. And it's the whole story of automatic authentication that goes on intranets, for instance, on the Microsoft intranet, is only possible through things like Active Directory. But Active Directory is not everything. We also need to have a way to integrate identity with systems that do not work with Windows security, but have their own models. And very many applications do so. Very many applications have their own user and password stores. Some systems require completely different directory services. Some applications are not built by ourselves and not hosted by ourselves, but by someone else. Still, if you want to set up a new employee, well, then you want the new employee to have access to all those information, to all those applications. If you fire an employee, you want to quickly revoke all the rights from that employee across all systems. So these are things which are relatively easy as long as everybody is sitting in the same directory service. But the reality is people are provisioned in N different user stores. So we need to do something about that. And that's what the identity integration server does for us. I'm going to talk about that in a little more detail in a few minutes. And then we have...
Clemens, you should push the button pointing at the computer, not at the screen.
Yeah, but it's not an infrared thing.
Yeah, but pointing up there doesn't help at all. I'll explain to you how it works after the session. Just trust me. Point this way. You're being befuddled by the illusion of reality, Clemens.
I'm an architect.
I can tell.
Yeah. Now, there are times when you need to integrate with someone else. There's times where you really need to integrate with partners or where you need to integrate with the world. So you have a number of users that talk to you, let's say customers, and there are several 100,000 of them if you're lucky. However, you don't want to make every single of those customers a customer in your internal domain. The infrastructure people will be very unhappy about that. And customers have no business being in your domain or managed by your domain, most often. In addition to that, you may have resources that you need to have accessible for partners. So let's say you have a document store, and the document store allows access for your employees and for the employees of a partner company. So you have a joint SharePoint site. You don't want to have the customer provisioning or your partner provisioning your service directly, but you also don't want to be provisioning for them, so you don't want to add and remove people as they hire employees or employees just leave their company. Instead, you want them to manage their employees, and then just they come to you and say, you know what, this person here is an employee of ours. And they come with that so-called claim to you, and you say and you trust them and say, everybody who they say is an employee of ours is okay. So they do their provisioning, you do your provisioning, and there's trust going between those two systems, which says, this is an employee, he has a ticket, he can pass. That's the sort of functionality that ADFS makes possible, Active Directory Federation Services. And then we have functionality that's Windows Card Space. Card Space is the same story. We're going to go into a lot of detail in our 5th talk about that. Card Space is a new technology, part of the .NET Framework 3.0, part of Windows Vista, which gives you a wallet of cards, just as the cards that you have in your wallet today. You can have a credit card, or you have some frequent flyer pass or a hotel pass or any of those things. And these are pieces that talk about you and your rights, that talk about identity. And just as much as you have a wallet in your pocket today, you can have a wallet that you have on your computer, and you can present cards instead of presenting passwords. Passwords are, by now, the curse of the internet, because we just have too many of them, and we can't really remember them all. So we need to have a mechanism that's easier than passwords, and Card Space gives you that mechanism. We're going to explain more about that in our 5th talk. So let's look at Windows and its authentication capabilities first. If you're building an application, you should be using Windows Security, period. The reason why you should be using Windows Security, why you should really be leveraging Active Directory, why you should really be leveraging the Windows built-in authentication systems and not have a username and a password stored in a database, is because if you're using a Windows username and a password in your database, you're opting out of the entire security infrastructure of Windows. And your application just shouldn't do this. You can have smart card support, you can have single sign-on, you can have all the security, all the authentication and security services integrated into your app. We have a huge authorization system in Windows Server 2003, which is called Authorization Manager, which doesn't get much attention, at least not much that I read of, even though it should be really popular. It's a very rich model for creating roles, for creating authorization metadata that you can use in your application. We have management tools for those. We have IT training courses for those. So there's a whole lot of infrastructure that's part of Windows that you don't need to pay for because you already have it. There's a whole lot of infrastructure that you don't need your IT pros to train for explicitly because they already can get that training or probably already have that training. So all of that should be used in applications because we have all of those things built in straight into the Windows platform, as much on the client as on the server. And these are things which are really easy to write on. And not using this is, I could understand, 2002 that someone would say, yeah, this still needs to run on NT4, but by now, Active Directory is, or those, at least those infrastructure services that we have in the framework, which also work on other LDAP stores, for instance, is directory services are a fact of life in the IT infrastructure, and therefore your applications should be leveraging those. Look, now it worked. I pointed.
Every time I give you technical advice, Clemens, it works.
It's fantastic.
I want you to remember that.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Steve. You're so good to me.
I live to serve you.
Yes. Well, in this talk, Steve just observes
and harass
and makes occasional fun of me. That's the role. You play that well, even though you could harass me more, actually.
And in the sixth talk, I get to do all the talking. Since we're not allowed to talk about futures yet, I'm less likely to get fired than he is if I make a mistake.
So there's a huge identity lifecycle around provisioning user accounts, and that's another reason why you should be using Windows Identity in your apps, because it's really hard to build all those things yourself, and you're actually wasting your time. So, new user, right? You create a new user, you need to establish credentials. Now, how do you do that? You need to issue a new account. You need to set up a new password. You need to actually have a protocol for how to get the password set up with the customer. You need to have some with the customer, for instance, or with the new employee. So you need to have tooling to set that up. You need to set up the first provisionings, like what sort of roles does the customer play or the employee play. Then you need to change those rights. Maybe you have a human resource web or human resource system, and you promote someone, and with that they get more rights. They automatically need to be enrolled in additional distribution lists, for instance, or they need to get access to additional websites on the internet. You want to make sure that you know who has rights to what, because under legal regulations, you need to be able to report who actually has access rights to which things. So you need to do all those things. And then 70% of all calls to the Microsoft Help Desk are about password resets. The internal Microsoft Help Desk. 70% of all calls. So it's useful to have something where people can actually do self-service password resets, which we have. Think about all the websites which have self-service password reset tools. If they wouldn't have them, they would be just swamped with calls. So you need to have that infrastructure to just be able to, for someone to retrieve their password to deal with those cases. That's stuff you need to build. And then, of course, you need to be able to retire a user. Either they quit or they get fired, and which means if they get fired and they've done something bad, like they've stolen the silver spoons, then could be, or worse things. Then you really want to disable that account within a minute or so in all systems that you have, and that may be hundreds of them with different databases. Doing all those things is really, really hard. Building those things yourself in your applications is even harder. And building those for each application is hard and is also silly, because do you expect users to go to each page of every app and reset their password? Probably not. So one solution that we have for this is Identity Integration Server. Identity Integration Server actually implements that sort of workflow and gives you the tooling to not only replicate information between separate data stores. You can write, if you have an application today that has username and password, you can write an adapter and plug it into Identity Integration Services. And what it will do is it will synchronize with Active Directory, and you can actually flow things, also a password, into your application, and you can flow information back into Identity Integration Service. So if you have a number of properties associated with the user account, you want to flow those things out. You can flow those things out to Active Directory, and Active Directory can propagate them into other applications. Or you can change your password at one central place, and then it will just propagate that password out to all other systems that need explicit passwords. An identity integration server will do that all for you. It's built to integrate the whole concept of identity across different applications. And we decided to put this box shot here, and we promise that's the only one we'll have.
What do you mean we, Clemens?
So I.
There you go.
Sorry. Because that's a product that you should really look at. So, then we have Active Directory Federation Services, which is creating this trust between organizations. If you don't want to expose the internals of your Active Directory, all the users in your Active Directory, to the outside world, but you still want to have some integration with your security integration of the outside world with your inside world, if you want to allow people from other organizations based on their membership in that organization, so there are members of the department so-and-so, they're members of the car development for the new Model X, and you are a supplier, and you only want to allow people from that department to go to your share because you're collaborating, then it's up to them to manage that membership, and they bring the claim of that membership along to your system, and ADFS is going to federate that trust. So ADFS is there to create those to create this trust environment. Not only is it supporting WS Star Web Services, so it supports directly the WS Trust and WS Federation protocols, but it also has a plugin for IIS, which allows you to do this in a passive mode, which allows you a single sign-on story, where you can allow, based on their membership in the other organization, you can allow people on a website without them having to launch an app, but just as much as it's seamless to browse your own intranet because of you having Active Directory installed and Kerberos working, just that same seamless experience can be made for outside partners. They don't have to type in a password, but they're just logged into their local intranet. They browse out to their site, to your site, and they can just see it. They don't need to punch in anything. It'll just work because Active Directory Federation Services brokers that trust and actually creates the necessary authentication authorization information. So that's another piece of application infrastructure that's there for you to utilize. Card space is something we're going to talk about in the 5th talk in more detail because it needs a little more room. So that's our identity integration story. Why is there still an animation here? Oh yeah, because of that. And some of those features are really about integration. Card space is about integration. Active Directory Federation Service is about integration. Identity Integration Server obviously is about integration. But we have a bigger integration story here. We have products that we started up with, and let's go back to 1996, to that time. The product we started up with in terms of integration was the product we needed to have because everything that mattered happened on IBM mainframes. So we had SMA Server, which allowed us to reach out to IBM mainframes and do two things. First of all, it allowed us to integrate into terminal sessions, and second of all, it allowed us to integrate with host transactions. So that was SMA Server, and then came this whole Toolkit, along with Biztalk Server 2000, as our next step into the integration story. SOAP and then Biztalk Server were basically our statement to say, all right, well, I guess we do need to integrate with the world. Because maybe not everybody wants to run Windows. No, it's a ludicrous thought, but what can you do? Some people just don't get any wiser. and run stuff on other platforms.
I don't use any IBM mainframes at the house anymore, Clemens.
You don't.
But I had a friend back in the 80s who bought a used IBM mainframe, put it in his basement, sold time services, and heated the whole apartment building with the heat that came out of the machine.
I have no doubt that that's true.
Back in those days, IBM was the bad guy because they wouldn't let Amdahl and Fujitsu make machines.
I know.
Things have changed.
No, I think Amdahl and Fujitsu, do they still? No, I think they don't make clones anymore.
I think they've gone the same direction as WordPerfect.
That still exists.
I know. They all exist, Clemens. It's a happy world where everyone is thriving.
In
their own way.
In their own. You're right. I guess that's true. So the thing SMA Server got renamed into Host Integration Server 2000 then. And the story continues up to ASP.NET Web Services as we know it, and Web Service Enhancements as we know it. And the picture today is that we have the Windows Communication Foundation, the Windows Workflow Foundation, Biztalk Server 2006, and Host Integration Server 2004, but 2006 is coming very soon. And we've come a long way in those things. SMA Server was basically just purely necessity. And that, in those times, Microsoft was still thinking, everybody will eventually run Microsoft, and SMA Server is just a interim solution until all applications run on Windows NT, which of course never happened. Biztalk Server 2000, as I said, was the first recognition that integration was necessary. And if you look at the offering of Biztalk, and Biztalk Server 2000 was just really a bare bones engine with some EDI support, with some support for some XML schemas. But if you look at the offering of Biztalk Server 2006 today, it is really impressive in terms of what adapters you have to integrate into applications. We have stuff for JD Edwards, we have stuff for PeopleSoft, we have stuff for Oracle, we have stuff for SAP. We have a broad range of adapters to plug straight into other applications to understand their document formats. We can map from and to their document formats, and it's really a great integration story. We keep improving Host Integration Server. We are about to launch a new version of that. So there are just data centers, of course, who continue to run their mainframes because they're very happy with them, of course. And we just keep listening to our customers, and we just bring back new feature requests, and the team just keeps building them because we think that our customers need to have good interoperability. And Host Integration Server, therefore, just has a happy team. They keep on cranking out features. And we have the new Windows Communication Foundation, and WCF was built explicitly to be an interoperable platform. Interoperability is so of key importance that we have a number of competitor products that we ran in our build labs, in our test labs, and tested against. And if we would break something on the wire, and that would cause a build test to fail, we would have a bug, and we would not be shipping. So we were and are very, very committed to make interoperability happen, to make the platform as open as we can make it, for you to plug in your interoperability features, your extensions, to plug in your own protocols, and for us to be as interoperable as we can. And we continue to do work in that area to enable other people to interoperate well with us. So it's certainly a changed world. One of the things that we're going to talk about later today is logic. And logic manifests itself in various ways, for instance in code, but also in workflows. Workflows are sequences of logic, much like workflow charts, that you can associate functionality with. Very often, it's better to use a workflow, a dynamics tool, such as a workflow, to represent a business process than to use, let's say, C++ or C#. Because C++ and C# are compiled and non-changeable. And C++ and C# lend themselves very easily to things that take a few milliseconds. But it's incredibly difficult to write something in C# or C++, which takes 4 weeks, where you just have a scope of functionality, you have 10 actions, and those 10 actions happen within the scope of a week. Writing that with C++ or C# ends up in a huge infrastructure that you need to build yourself to actually preserve that state, put it on disk, resurrect it from disk, find the right instance of your activity, resurrect the component and do all those things. As things get longer running, the less optimal of a tool C++ or C# or VB are. So you need to have something that is more of a workflow. Those things can change. You need to have a way to actually go in and have programs that run for a week or two, maybe 4 months or 10 months, or even a year, and then all of a sudden your business model changes. Rules, policies inside your organization changes, and you need to be able to take those programs, interrupt them in production, and take them to a next state, to a well-defined next state. You need to migrate them, you need to version them in production. That's really hard. Do that with C++. It's very, very difficult. And with a declarative runtime, with something like the Windows Workflow Foundation, that's something that's certainly easier to do. So there are sequential workflows, which are one thing follows the next, and then there are state machine workflows, where you have a state that's being influenced by events, so that's event-driven architecture. And all those things can be done, those two models can be done with the Workflow Foundation. What can also be done is rules-driven activities, where you have just sets of facts of business, and you can formulate them in a rules engine. You can formulate them in a set of rules, and then you can iterate through those rules, and you can make decisions based on those rules, but those rules are expressed in terms that the business understands. You can also exchange those rules, you can manipulate those rules while the programs are running, or you can exchange those rules very easily independent of the program. So you can make slight adjustments to your business model, to your business process based on that. Steve, I still have something to drink. Thank you very much. You're so good to me.
I live to serve, Clemens.
Oh, that's great. So the Windows Workflow Foundation is built with, you need to supply your host process. So it's a tool set. You don't get a server with it. It's just a tool set. It's like a programming language that you can plug in. It's sort of like Visual Basic for applications, right? Visual Basic for applications is something that you need to plug into your apps for it to work. And you can imagine that to be the same thing. It's an application extensibility mechanism that's supplied to you to host long-running stuff and actually to enable your application to be extensible by relatively normal people. Certainly not by C++ programmers, of which there are very few. But people who can build a workflow chart are more common. So if you want to have an extensibility mechanism like this for your app, you can use that. There's a bunch of services that are built into the runtime engine, such as persistence. So you can store workflows in SQL Server, or you can store workflows on disk. And then you can build your own activities on top of this, and you can build your own workflows on top of this. Interestingly enough, we have another picture that's sort of like this, but the names are a little different. We have a runtime that's called Biztalk Server 2006, and that is already a runtime. And we have an orchestration engine that has all those wonderful features. So we have a second workflow engine. But that has a lot more. So workflow is a tool set that you can use inside of your own applications. Orchestration is something that already comes with a robust server, that already comes with scalability features, that already comes with things like concepts of data flow, that already comes with a bunch of activities that are geared towards integration, such as mapping, such as being able to host a pipeline. So all these features, if you need to have integration between applications, if you need to build big business processes, then you probably are better off opting for the large workflow engine that we have, and that's the orchestration engine. So you can think of workflow as being a small model for building your own local workflows, for instance, a set of page flows on ASP.NET, a set of decisions about the flow of a Windows Forms application, things like a small business process that you want to be adjustable in your own application. If you want to build a large business process, then it's probably better to use the orchestration engine. So we give you two choices. We have a super robust, hosted, server-based workflow engine, which is the orchestration engine. And then we have a tool set that you can use yourself to build into your own apps, which we'll keep extending and where most of the investment is going to go in, which you can build and which will eventually probably be the basis for the next version of orchestration. But with Biztalk, you get all these additional features around your orchestration, around your workflows, and of course you get a set of design tools, and you get a whole lot of features around this, such as business activity monitoring. With BAM, you can go and just look at the surroundings of your application, the stuff that goes in and out, and you can actually start reasoning about the data that goes in and out. You can ask questions such as, how many orders have we gotten from Finland today, and what's the total value of them? And you can fetch that right from the incoming message stream and just display that on your BAM display, and you can do that today.
You tried to change the audience that time. You pointed right at the audience and pushed the button.
Oh, did I?
Yes, you did. They're a great audience, Clemens. There's no need.
Good. So, see, I skipped this. So, as I said, all those things are built with, so all the communication technologies that we built are built with SOAP and XML and WSTAR in mind. As it turns out, not everybody loves XML. Hard to believe, but that's a fact. Nobody loves, not all people love, not nobody, but not all people love our particular flavor of XML. Because we use XML and it's an extensible thing and nothing is defined about it, right? So we have a particular way of using XML together with IBM and BA, and other people have other opinions. So we need to have a way to speak all the other things. So that's another story for Biztalk here, where Biztalk just speaks all those different flavors of interoperability standards such as Swift and EDI with all sorts of different varieties of it and just translates between those formats. It's very easy today to build XML applications with the .NET framework. It's much harder and as hard as it always was to build applications that interact with EDI applications. Who of you has ever written a Swift parser? Okay, well, few battered poor souls, just as I am. Swift is a pretty arcane text format. And it has one bad feature. So the feature is called field 86 in MT960. So I wrote particularly the account statement. And field 60 is for special purposes. It turns out you need to write a parser for every single bank because there the designers go crazy and just put all sorts of things into field 86 is bad. And in general, it's not a pleasant format to parse.
You have these things in your head, Clemens. I have old pop songs. You have old protocol.
Yes. So I just remember them being very unpleasant, and I don't ever want to write a parser again.
But now you can get copies of Biztalk Server from the product web. You don't have to do that, Clemens.
That's right. And our customers can get them for a little contribution.
A small amount of money.
Yes.
Which probably they are not paying. None of these people.
But they need to convince the boss or the customer to pay them. Yes. And that's a wonderful thing. So Biztalk has this complete infrastructure to just exchange messages between sites, to actually do the mapping between the formats. So actually it has parsers. It has all those adapters to speak with different infrastructures, and that helps us to build better apps. It helps us to build applications that are no longer islands. If you have an application today that needs to be interoperable with other applications where you need to exchange data, and you currently don't have a web services stack, it's perfectly reasonable that you simply build an adapter for it and make it accessible through Biztalk. And Biztalk is gaining more and more acceptance in large companies. So if you are providing a Biztalk adapter along with your application, you're already saving them a lot of money. Because 70% of all expenditure in the enterprise is going into maintaining applications and integrating applications. Only 30% is going into innovation, but it's mostly 70% of all money is spent on keeping applications alive and breaking up the silos that applications are. And of course, we got the other product that I mentioned. We have Host Integration Server, and Host Integration Services integrate into WebSphere, integrate into DB2, integrate in all the host services that you know from the IBM world. Actually, pointing here actually helps.
Clemens, you are a slow learner.
Yeah, I'm just finding out. It's astonishing. So BAM, what I already told you, BAM is an infrastructure which sits at the edges of Biztalk Server today, and it will actually, as we go out with Biztalk R2 next year, we're going to extend that into the Windows Workflow Foundation and into Windows Communication Foundation, Reach, where you can go and intercept data as it goes in and out, or it goes between pieces of your application, and you can monitor this for business purposes. So you can go and track individual items out of your documents, and you can go and accumulate them and analyze them. So if you want to see a snapshot, how the business is looking right now, that truth is not in the database. That truth is actually on the wire. So if you want to see that, if you want to see really what has happened in the last hour and want to project it out to your CFO or your CEO, you can do that with BAM. BAM gives you a business projection of what's happening on the wire out to a portal that information workers can work with. And that's a pretty exciting functionality. So that's something that's certainly worth looking at, and we have information on that on the Biztalk website. So all of that puts together an application services spectrum that we have a lot of products in. There's rules, logic, and workflow. There's data and transactions. There's network services. There's integration services. There's identity. There's user experience. And there are a lot of technologies that fit into this. Of course, we're trying to reduce the number of technologies that are required for this, but we also give you a broad choice. Now, mind that before we had the Windows Communication Foundation coming, this would actually have 5 technologies more listed, which we're now consolidating into this one set of technologies. So we are fixing the Windows Communication Foundation thing. We have already fixed that. We have another set of features, which we call Windows Live. Well, we have today 2 services on the web under sts.labs.live.com and relay.labs.live.com, which are by invite only, but there's an email address posted that you can send to if you are interested in using those, which are live services for relaying messages that you may have. So if you have 2 parties who sit behind firewalls and they need to exchange messages, with normal web services, that's almost impossible, but we provide a relay for you that you can go through. We also have a secure token service, a federation service, identity federation service up in the sky that you can use for those purposes. We're providing them as in the Windows Live Labs currently as test beds, as beta versions to use in your infrastructure, but you can already imagine that if we put them in beta up there, that we have plans to actually do those things in production form. So we have a lot of services that are there for building your applications with, and most of those things that I put on here, we are either owning or we're major contributors to. For instance, SharePoint is using our workflow engine to power their workflow. So the workflow engine that sits inside of SharePoint in the new version 2007 is the Windows Workflow Foundation. So what started as a very humble beginning in 1996, well, actually was a bold start that at least they thought that.
So those guys were not humble, Clemens.
No, they were not. No, they were certainly not humble.
We don't hire for humble. That's why you fit right in, Clemens.
I understand. Okay, so what started as an unhumble beginning in 1996 has now accumulated to all those technologies that we have, how we cover the application spectrum. That's a different view of this. This is the marketing slide for that.
Do you know that Steve Ballmer had to build this slide? Getting all the teams to agree to what color they were going to be and where they sat on the slide required Steve Ballmer to get everyone in a room.
Is that true?
I swear to God, Clemens.
Really?
Once again, you asked me. I tell truth all the time.
Did he throw chairs?
No. He's a very calm guy, Clemens.
He is.
Yes. Very moderate, peaceful, reasonable man who makes slides like this.
Is he a PowerPoint MVP?
Not like you, Clemens.
Ah, okay. So that's the all up story that we have as the application platform. But the reason for this talk was just to go and explode that picture for you and just show you what we have as features in the connected systems division, how we can help you help you with application services to build better applications. We have a lot of things that are there to extend the reach of your apps, to make your application work better with others, to make your applications more secure. And so there's a lot of infrastructure that you can leverage to make your apps better. I'm not saying that every application should use all of them. That would certainly be overkill. But you should fully expect that if you're an ISV and you write some standard software for some field, that Biztalk Server will be part of the picture at a client side. Enterprises today run hundreds, if not thousands, of mission-critical applications. They're all interconnected. Right? If you do something that has something to do with numbers, you will have to talk to your accounting system that sits probably over in an Oracle or SAP system. You will have to talk to it unless you are the accounting system. Well, if you're writing the accounting system, if that's what you sell, well, then you need to accept data from other applications. All applications need to work with all other applications today. Even if you think that your application rules the world, your customers may think otherwise. And if they say, okay, we want to have that one database where we store all address data, well, then at least you need to be able to synchronize with other applications the address data and negotiate with them. You know, what's the freshest data, and how do we deal with reconciling synchronization failures and all of that. So you need to be ready to integrate apps, and we're trying to help you with our infrastructure to do that. So, Steve.
Clemens, I think pigs are going to be flying, because this is the first time in my life I have seen you finish this talk on time.
Actually, I'm 5 minutes early, but
we're going to be able to show some of the slides since it's early in the week. We can tell people about coming events.
Exactly. So here comes.
We can even maybe ask a question.
That's right.
Or ask people.
So don't leave yet.
Go ahead, Clemens.
Okay. So that was the all-up story. Let me just foreshadow the next talks that are coming. So now we gave you that picture, and admittedly it was a little markety. Sorry.
Clemens is turning.
Yeah, it's bad. Last year I said they.
Now you say we.
Now
Clemens.
I say we, which shows you how far things have come.
He has a house. He's going to have a baby. The baby's going to be American. Root for my college football team rather than your soccer team.
We're going to see about that. But so the next talks, the next 4 of them will absolutely be non-marketing, and they will all be talking about the details of data and logic and presentation and identity about patterns. So, and they are pretty playful at times. And during TechEd, there's something going on which Steve loves, and that's the Iron Architect competition.
And this goes like this. It's kind of like the Olympics. And so you go down there and you can enter different events. One of the events they were telling me is like the biathlon. The architect swoops out of the mountains, comes to the user, takes a shot, kills efficiently, and goes into the cold. And you can compete in these events down there, Clemens.
So there's something going on there. I think there's a challenge where you need to solve something,
It's the shooting. It's the biathlon club.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
You need to go and
Skiing and riflery.
oh, you need to go in, draw a picture in UML, thoroughly confuse everybody in the room, and leave.
That maybe it's like that.
And if nobody can actually figure out what you've done after you left the room, you win.
There you go.
So it turns out that there's a great prize here, which is you can win an MCA test process. Now, MCA is a Microsoft Certified Architect thing it costs you $12,000 to enter or something like this, $10,000 or $12,000. That's a testing process that's brand new by Microsoft Learning. And it's a very interesting circle of people to be in.
He says, being one of them.
Yeah, I'm one of the 120 in the world right now. We're trying to get more people into that circle, but it's a very tough certification. And so Microsoft is the winner of this prize here is waived the whole fee for the process, which is a big thing. And that's a very, very interesting program. So it's certainly worth to go to that booth and learn about the MCA program, what that means, and participate in the competition.
Clemens and I are for sure going to be down in the Ask the Expert area on Friday. We'll probably be sometimes in the framework booth, sometimes in the architect booth, sometimes in the Biztalk booth.
Yes.
We'll probably be down there other times, but this is the time we are scheduled.
Yep.
And we ask you to please fill out your feedback forms, because in addition to the Zen Vision M, there's a prize of a free trip to Kirkland, where you can get up at 6 in the morning with some other goofy person who watches his team at real time with some program he wrote that brings his television signal from Germany to his home in Kirkland, who I'm not naming the name. Clemens, you could push one more slide and we would be done before the red button.
Oh, great.
Any questions?
One question we could take.
Question right there.
You hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. You mentioned earlier on that you've got the workflow foundation, which is a small engine, and then you got a big engine, which is Biztalk. So I can imagine using the small workflow engine in a departmental system, but in an enterprise system, it'll have to integrate. Can you tell me a little bit more on how you would integrate your small workflow engine within the Biztalk context?
Through web services.
Yep. So what happens is that Biztalk can speak, in addition to all the other protocols it speaks web services. So you can use the ASMX adapter to send messages to the workflow, which is running over in IIS. And the message comes in and triggers some processing in the workflow in IIS. And when it's done, the response goes back to Biztalk and carries on. So as we carry forward, you'll learn in the 6th talk our plans in the Orcus timeframe to make that much smoother. But over time, what you'll see is that all the WCF communication channels will be able to talk to code and workflow and be integrated that way into Biztalk.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming, and I hope you come to our next talk.
Please.